Sat in my garden, I can sometimes feel like I'm in the countryside, but the reality is that my home is about a mile from the city centre of Leicester, and therefore I am part of that area now in further lockdown. I wanted therefore to send a very personal message to the Diocese of Leicester, both those within the city and those in the county of Leicestershire. And I wanted to say three things at this time. Firstly, I count it one of the greatest honours ever bestowed on me to have been appointed Bishop of this diocese. And one of the great attractions to me of coming here was that we are a very diverse place. Not just the diversity of the city itself, but indeed the fact that we are city and county. And the fact, therefore, that we have gifts to share with one another which come from our very different contexts. And my appeal firstly, therefore, to the Diocese of Leicester is that at this time more than any other, we need to stand alongside one another, shoulder to shoulder, whatever our particular circumstances. So my hope is that we will hold one another in prayer. My hope is that we'll find practical ways of showing our love and our compassion towards one another at this time. But secondly, I also want to celebrate all that is good in particular about this city. I not only love the diversity of the city and the many cultures and the many faiths that are represented here, but I also believe that this city has an amazing track record of pulling together in the face of crises. Just this week, I was reading the reports from a national charity which had done some research on the response of various cities all around Europe in response to the pandemic, and in particular, the way those cities had cared for people who are homeless. They highlighted Leicester as an example of a city that has responded extremely well, of both local council and charities all working together to get people off the streets into accommodation and to work with them to try to find permanent accommodation. If a society is to be judged by the way it cares for its most vulnerable, then our response here in the city of Leicester to people who are homeless is, I think, something rightly to be proud of. But alongside celebrating all that is good and pulling together across the diversity of city and county, I also want to just briefly reflect with you on the theme of tiredness, because my own sense is that the overwhelming emotion around at the moment is that of weariness. I myself have sensed that very much, but I've also been reflecting in the last couple of weeks on the different forms of tiredness that there are. I'm a great hill walker. I love nothing better than getting out into the mountains. And I love in particular the feeling at the end of the day when my muscles may be aching and I'm physically worn out. And yet emotionally and indeed spiritually, I'm buoyed up. The view from the mountaintop, the smell of the bracken, the sound of the skylark, all these things emotionally renew me. So there are different sorts of tiredness, and what I'm feeling at the moment is not necessarily physical tiredness, but it is a deep emotional tiredness. And I'm not on my own. This last week I interviewed a GP for one of these weekly messages. It'll go out next week as part of our celebrations of the anniversary of the NHS. But this particular GP spoke of her emotional roller coaster during the course of this pandemic. Early on, she said, she was scared, knowing that she was working on the front line. But over time, she said, that emotion has simply been taken over by exhaustion. Now she's just tired out. And she said most of her colleagues are similarly. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." I've often been intrigued by those words, beautiful though they are in terms of speaking of rest and laying down our burdens. But that image of taking up the yoke That's something that's used of oxen. It's what enables them to be able to pull the cart or the plough. And to me, it looks like something very heavy, something that's designed to constrain the oxen and make sure they just focus on the one task. So what's that got to do with rest, I wonder? Well, the connection is with the words that Jesus goes on to say, "Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in spirit." I believe that is the route to finding true emotional and spiritual rest for our souls. To learn from Jesus, to be gentle with one another, yes, but also gentle with ourselves, not expecting too much of ourselves, not always beating ourselves up for what we've not been able to do or what we think we ought to have done, but being gentle with ourselves. And then being humble enough to ask others for help, and being willing to build others up, to encourage others, to seek to strengthen and support them. Yes, learning from Jesus is not easy. It is, if you like struggling up a mountain. It's hard physical work, but it is the route to emotional and spiritual rest. And so my hope is that whatever your circumstances, wherever you live, whatever your emotions at this particular time, that you will find the spiritual rest that Jesus offers when we learn from him.